Farage, respond to this this email from LBC listener Max Lake. If we came out of the EU, this would affect the job prospects of young people. He's right, isn't it?
I think
young people watching.
No, I think he is right. I think Max is right because outside the European Union, we would be able to get rid of some of the ridiculous excesses that we currently have. You see, it's all well and good. It's all well and good to have employment legislation that is designed for giant multinational companies. But if that legislation applies to small firms, and bear in mind, 60% of people that work in the private sector in Britain work for companies with 10 employees or less. I spoke to a business yesterday that was about to set up. They approached the Forum for Private Business to ask for advice on employment law. They were sent a document that is 350 pages long. If we could reduce that burden of employment, health and safety and work, and environmental law, we could create
how many jobs?
Many jobs indeed. And that is really a major problem that the British economy currently has.
Thank you, Nick.
I think the answer that UKIP and other people who want to withdraw ourselves from what is the world's largest economy need to answer is how many jobs are they prepared to sacrifice? It's been reliably estimated that over 3 million jobs are linked to our position within the European Union, which is, by the way, a marketplace of 500 million shoppers, 500 million consumers who buy our goods and services that we sell to them. And unlike what you just heard, 50%, half of what we sell goes to the rest of Europe. Actually, the rest of Europe, only 8% of what they sell goes to us. So we benefit enormously from this. Now, if it's not 3 million, because I guess 3 million jobs, of course, wouldn't disappear overnight, is it 2 million? Is it 1 million? Is it 500,000? My view is we shouldn't be sacrificing a single job just to fulfill this dogmatic view that we should turn our backs on the rest of the world and on Europe. 3 million jobs is 3 million pay packets, is millions of families in this country being able to pay their bills, which they otherwise wouldn't. And that's why this is, at the end of the day, about jobs.
I have to say, Nigel Farage, one moment, there is some research that will question that 3 million figure, I have to say, Deputy Prime Minister. Nigel Farage.
Nick, when you answer a question like that, by saying 3 million jobs are at risk, you show that, like virtually everybody at Westminster, you've never run your own company, you've never had a proper job in the real world, you are part of this political bubble that picked up a piece of research that was produced 10 years ago by a guy who himself now says all he said was the jobs are linked to trade in Europe, they're not at risk.
This is what I said.
And all of you all do it. Tories do it, Labour do it, the big banks do it, the multinationals do it, and the truth is this. We sell, in terms of manufactured products, about £100 billion of the goods every year to Europe. It's about 40% of our overseas sales. It is quite important. No doubt it's important. Declining every year, but important. But the point is this. They sell us roughly £150 billion of the goods every single year. The United Kingdom, this is extraordinary, the United Kingdom is now the Eurozone's biggest export market in the world. They sell us more than they sell to Japan, or to China, or to the United States of America. And trade is not something created by politicians and bureaucrats. No. Trade is created by consumers who make a decision. I like this product, right. I'm prepared to pay its price. I spent 20 years in the private sector. I can tell you something, in private business, the customer is king. And when it comes to renegotiating a trade agreement with Europe, with no threat to any jobs, apart of course from the commissioners and the British MEPs who'd all be turfed out on their ear, and that's no bad thing. When it comes to a renegotiation of that deal, we actually hold the whip hand. That is the real world of economics. That is how it works.
Gentlemen, let's bring in another, Mr. Clegg, if you will. Let me bring in another. It is related to this, so you will have your opportunity. Jamila Long, who is in banking. Jamila.
How are we supposed to compete with the likes of China or America if we're not part of a larger trading group?
So how would we compete with the likes of China and America if we're not part of a bigger trading bloc? Neatly, Mr. Clegg, it falls to you to go first.
I agree with you, Jamila. Look, the world is changing dramatically. You know this, Jamila, from your experience in finance. We all know this. It's not the 1950s. We can't turn the clock back. We've got these new powers on the world stage, Brazil, China, India, and we get more clout by operating through the world's largest economy. That's what the European Union is, despite its faults, despite the fact that it needs to be reformed. It is the world's largest economy. And we get clout by actually representing 500 million people when we measure up to the Chinese and the Americans and others in trade negotiations. This is the fundamental flaw of UKIP's vision. Just imagine what would happen. So we pull out of the European Union. We're no longer part of that the world's largest economy. We no longer have the clout of being part of that economic superpower. And we, as a country of 60 million people, are, according to UKIP, supposed to be able to cut the same deal with the giants of America and China as we can with the clout of representing 500 million consumers. It simply doesn't add up. We get more clout rather than less by being part of this big European economic superpower.
Mr. Clegg, thank you. Nigel Farage.
Well, once again, Nick, you just show you don't really understand the worlds of commerce and trade. Do you know, when the World Trade Organization meets to discuss global trade, the British representatives are shown the door and asked to leave. No. The world's 6th largest trading nation, the world's 8th largest manufacturing nation, is not allowed to be present in the room.
It's not true.
Because we're members of a European Union, so we have to be represented by a Dutch bureaucrat whose name no one knows and who nobody can vote for. A quite extraordinary state of affairs. We are banned, forbidden from making our own trade deals, with countries like India or Canada or Australia or New Zealand. People who would, at the drop of a hat, sign trade deals with us, we are prevented from doing so. And the reason is, people like Nick don't think Britain's good enough. We're just not good enough. We must give away control of all of these things to somebody else who'll do it for us. We're too small to survive. Iceland has 320,000 people. And in March last year, they signed a free trade agreement with China. If it's good enough for Iceland to do it, I'm damn certain the British, with 64 million, could do even better.
Mr. Farage,
Can I respond to that?
In a sentence,
Can I respond to that? Because unlike Nigel Farage, I actually, before I went into politics, was involved in these trade negotiations. It is simply not true, what you've just heard. Of course it is right that the European Union should measure up as a bloc with the clout of 500 million consumers when you negotiate with the Chinese and the Americans and the Russians, as I did in a previous job. By the way, I keep hearing what Nigel Farage is part. He and I were actually elected as Euro MPs on the same day in 2009. I left the European Parliament after 5 years. He still remains the Euro politician. But I think it is important that we remember that we gain clout by being part of the world's largest economic superpower. And the idea that we would first have to, if we did what UKIP said, first have to renegotiate with 27 other countries in the rest of Europe. And then negotiate with the 50 countries through which we have trade agreements because of our membership of the European Union. So that's 77 countries that a future government would have to renegotiate trade agreements with just to get some of the trade access back that we've lost. I tell you, a government in the future would do nothing for the next 20 years.
Not unless we get a government that believes in Britain, believes in the British people, and says we can make our own arrangements all over the world that suit us, and we don't have to do it.
I believe in jobs in this country.
European
Suggest that believing in jobs in this country.
We've got to have a global future for Britain, not one tied, shackled inside a European Union that is showing itself to be out of date and failing in every measure.
Mr. Farage, I wonder if I can show you some literature that's going to be sent out as part of your campaign for the forthcoming European election. The EU costs the UK £55 million a day, and this is the leaflet that I will be going out later. Where do you get that figure from?
Well, that is just, I mean, to be fair, Nick, that is just our contribution. I mean, that is the beginning of the cost.
You don't say that here.
That is the beginning. No, if you really add it all up, the true cost of membership of the European Union is many, many times that. No. Because what we found.
What about the rebates?
What we found. Well, if I give you £20.
Yes.
And you give me £10 back, I'm not better off, am I? So we give them gross £55 million a day. Yes, they give us money back, but they only give us money back to be spent on ways that they choose, not the ways that we choose.
But the true cost is misleading, is it not, Mr. Farage?
No, it is absolutely factual. That is our contribution.
Of course it's misleading.
As I said at the start of this programme, our membership fee of the club is £55 million a day.
But again, I have to put it to you, you exclude rebates, you exclude fund. I have to put it for a third time.
I've excluded the loss of our fishing. I've excluded the massive cost, the environmental cost, frankly, of building wind turbines and damaging manufacturing industry. No, that figure is a very, very low figure. The true cost of EU membership is many times that.
Okay. May I make two observations? Just like this leaflet saying that 29 million Romanians and Bulgarians are going to turn up on your doorstep, when there aren't even 29 million Romanians and Bulgarians there. This is once again a claim that simply is not true. If you actually count the rebate, if you actually count what British farmers, for instance, receive in the Common Agricultural Policy, it's less than half that figure. And if you then consider how we benefit from the jobs, from the trade that we get from being part of the world's largest economy, actually, reliable estimates show that it's worth about up to £3,300 per household. But the question for Nigel Farage is, if he cares so much about British money, why is it when this government negotiated a cut, which he said was not possible, a cut in the EU budget, saving 30 billion British pounds, why was it that the UK Independence Party MEPs didn't even bother to vote for it? So if you actually have a place in Europe where you can bat for Britain, why is it that UK MEPs again and again don't stand up for Britain? That's the bit I simply don't understand.
Isn't that amazing? Isn't that amazing that the Prime Minister, your partner, comes back from Brussels and says, I've struck a great deal. It's a victory for Britain. And I hope that British MEPs will support this. This victory for Britain meant that whilst the EU's overall budget didn't increase as much as expected, Britain's contributions would rise. If that's a victory in Europe, I'd hate to see what a defeat looks like.
Let's move